Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive! This week, I begin a three-part series talking about Changeling the Dreaming, one of the classic World of Darkness games. Changeling has a unique place in the World of Darkness because as much as it is a game about the fighting against the inevitable, the tides of growing winter, it is also a game about hope. And when you look into the past of the World of Darkness, most of the artwork in all the other books in the original run was black and white. Maybe an occasional color panel here or there. But most of the original World of Darkness books were black and white artwork. Changeling was different. The very first edition and second edition of Changeling were the first full-color books done for White Wolf. And this was actually an aesthetic choice for the game line. This was because this made Changeling this sort of bright, shining beacon among the dreary world of darkness. Now, like all my World of Darkness videos, I'm going to be doing this as a three-part series. Part 1 is going to be the history of the setting. Part 2 is going to be the current day of the setting. And Part 3 will be taking a look at the more notable mechanics. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we talk about Changeling the Dreaming. Let's start the discussion on Changelings with the most fundamental question. The question that will lay the foundation for and be a thread through the entire discussion of Changeling history. And that question is, what is a changeling? Now, old myths would say that a changeling is a child that was taken away by the Fae, and the changeling itself is the duplicate put in its place. That's not where Changeling went. Or at least not this version of Changeling. Changeling the Dreaming answers the question, what is the changeling? With this. A changeling is a creature of dreams. Each of the modern kith, the various species of changelings, have their origins in the dreams of humanity. A Zadir is from the dreams of revelry and debauchery and music and stuff like that. A Boggin is going to be from the dreams of domesticity, of tending a hearth at home, of entertaining guests. A Troll is going to be from dreams of strength, honor, and besting mighty foes. And so on and so on. Each changeling comes from a lineage of dreams, so to speak. And these are their roots. Because changelings feed on something called glamour. Glamour is that spark of creativity. Well, it is not the spark itself. It is what is given off from a mortal being creative. It is that something that inspires others. And changelings use this. This is what fuels their abilities, keeps them where they are, keeps them in this two worlds, in the banal mortal realm and in the dreaming of the fairy. And with this, they are fighting what's going on in the world. They are fighting that growing tendency for people to wonder, is there more to life than just work and paying bills? Because that is the antithesis to them. That lack of creativity, that grinding away of joy and creation and art. Look at the modern world. Look how much people dismiss and frown upon artists. Yet artists are the greatest source of glamour. And this is the world of the changelings. This is what they are fighting against. They are fighting to keep art and creativity alive in the world. Because once those are gone, so are they. And they fear that the autumn we're in will turn into a winter that never ends. Though there are some who believe that on the other side of winter might be a glorious new spring. But with that all out of the way, now that you know what a changeling is, let's start talking about the history, shall we? In the beginning, the darkest of dreams ruled. Dreams of terror that dominated humanity. These entities were the Fomorians. They were united only in that their images, their forms, invoked fear and terror in mortals. And humanity lived in fear of these things. And humanity served them, toiled for them, getting nothing in return. But always humanity yearned for saviors, someone to liberate them from these entities. And as humanity slept, the dreaming heard their calls for saviors, and it answered. From these earliest dreams came the Fae of nature. Fae of the wind, of earth, of fire, of water. And these Fae fought the Fomorians. These became humanity's champions. And as they fought, things happened. The Fomorians created dark servants of their own, dreamed up their own nightmare Fae, the Thalain. And from these came this war between the two groups, the Nature Fae and the Fomorians and their Thalain allies. And at some point, the Fomorians began to unleash all of their magic at once, in a last-ditch effort, planning to destroy the world so that they could recreate it into something more to their liking. The Nature Fae countered this with their own great unleashing to maintain and save this world. And the two unleashings became known as the Great Unleashing. And these destroyed many on both sides. But they changed the world. This Great Unleashing gave humanity a sense of order and a sense of higher ideals. And it spawned a new group of Fae. These were the fairy clans and the Tuatha De Danann. And among them was one fairy, Dana, who had a greater connection to the balance of the world than any other Fae. And she guided the Fae in guiding humanity. And over this time, the Fae continued their war against the Fomorians. And a Fomorian called the Red King emerged. He had become the great leader of them. And he carried a great weapon, the Triumph Cask of Sorrows. A magical weapon that consisted of all the world's nightmares and destructive energies. It was a weapon so powerful that it could destroy everything. And so he never opened it. He never released the full energy. But even just its presence unleashed destruction on the battlefields. And in a final battle, a group of the Tuatha managed to get past all his defenses and were able to slay the Red King. In his final act, he shattered the cask into multiple pieces and tossed them around the world. But with this, the Fairy were like, we've defeated the Fomorians. They cannot rise from this again. And the Fomorians surrendered. And with this, the Tuatha De Danann left the mortal world. They left behind, though, 3 sacred oaths binding the changelings towards guiding humanity. Well, the changelings kind of got lost in their own petty squabbles and left humanity set up to grow and develop on its own. But that darkness that created the Fomorians still lurked at the heart of humanity. And so that corrupted some of what humanity would develop. And what happened then is the groups of changelings split into courts. And as humanity went to war with itself, these 2 courts would go against each other. Maybe 4 courts, some records say this. But whatever the case, there was this great battle, the Battle of Stones. And the changelings were fighting this battle. And in the middle of this battle, at the time of this battle, humanity discovered something. Humanity discovered cold iron, which is the bane of the dreaming. A metal so banal that its mere presence can be anathema to some changelings. And the creation of this one item of cold iron, it does not matter what it is, and what that item is never mentioned. But the creation of this first cold iron item caused the Sundering. Now, the Sundering took a millennia. Took 1,000 years. But immediately, it stripped the dreaming and the mortal world. Separated them. And at this time, the changelings mostly stayed in the dreaming. They would come out to interact with humanity through the trods, the roads between the dreaming and the mortal world. They would disguise themselves as humans, or they would recruit those in and make them spies among humanity. But we've not seen the first true changelings yet. These are still fairy. No. What caused us to see the first true changelings is a second event. There was an eclipse that covered much of the autumn world. Our world. The mortal world. And it passed unnoticed by the Fae. But it darkened the dreaming. And it caused panic among mortals. And with the growth of the Abrahamic religions, the shattering happened. This was the key event that changed utterly everything. Some changelings went into their holdings, sealing them off from the mortal world, and going slowly mad within them. The She, with the exception of houses Scathach and Liam, fled back to Arcadia through the last remaining portal, making the other Fae wait, thinking that they'd be able to get in. And no, that never happened. She went there and basically sealed the door behind them. And then those Fae who knew that they had nothing to do, had no holdings to hide, could not get through the gate to Arcadia, they underwent a process called the Changeling Way. What the Changeling Way is they bound their spirits to the mortal coil, putting themselves through a cycle of rebirths, and each one would live in a mortal, go through their chrysalis, awaken into what they were, and then eventually banality would push their changeling spirit back into slumber, and they would be reborn in the next incarnation. And that led to the world as we know it, or as they know it. There was a period between this and an event later that was basically just changelings trying to survive, trying to deal with the Renaissance and keep humanity creative in spite of things like the Renaissance, the dreamers being killed by torch and rope by the Inquisitions and the various other actions of Christianity and the Abrahamic religions. And then you have the Depression and the World Wars. And all these led to a moment following the Second World War called the Resurgence. And what the Resurgence is it happened right after the moon landing. There was this surge of glamour from just this one sense of wonder that humanity had at that it was a signal to the Arcadian She, that it is now time to return. That humanity is now coming out of this darkness that was the Shattering. And so they came. They came through the portals that reopened as the wake of this. And they came to go, we're back, we're going to reassume our rights of rulership. And it didn't quite work out that way. Simply put, you had a group of leaders who no one remembered anymore because they'd been gone for so long, for so many generations. And you have people who've learned to live without them. And so you ended up with this rebellion between the two groups. And rebellion is the way the She see it. The rest of the Changelings see it as telling those uptight dickwads who's boss now. And that's basically what happened. It was a war between the commoners and the nobles. And it was a brutal war, with many on both sides being killed with cold iron. And finally, one of the She brokered a peace. This She, the High King David, would basically negotiate treaties, allowing the Changelings to take up the positions of nobility, and basically going that the Arcadian She don't get to call the shots completely anymore. They have to listen to the commoners, etc., etc. And that is the basics of the history of Changeling. Next week, I will talk about the actuality of the setting itself, what goes on, the politics, and all that. So until then, I'd like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.